not sure how it's going to work. We're trying some things with GoToMeeting to bring in people if they don't want to be here in present, so to speak. And I'm sure we'll have some follow-ups and things along the way. But again, it's all about public safety, and you, as part of the public, are a primary concern to all of us. So we hope you understand, and if there is some uncomfort, please let us know. We'll do our best to accommodate you. If you don't want to be in a public setting, but still participate. So that's our commitment to you all. Tonight, in preparation of the work session, Mr. Newberry, Mr. Young, and I put together a fairly thick packet of information. A lot of it is repetitive, so to speak, in that it's the information that we've created through our kind of staged process to get to the point we are tonight. And that point we are tonight, for the most part, is a final, so to speak, version of the revised sign regulations, reflective of all of the Planning and Zoning Commission's input, the public input, the review of our city attorney, and then direction, so to speak, from certain members of the Planning and Zoning Commission relative to items they'd like to see. So tonight is kind of the capstone to the effort. If all goes well tonight at this work session, it would be the intent of the Planning Department to present the final draft letter of recommendation, which is also included in the packet, to you all for a final vote. And with that, we would have concluded our review, which, as you can see, began almost a year ago in June of 2019 with our public hearing. I think Mr. Newberry, Mr. Young, and I would say first and foremost, thank you for your perseverance, your tenacity, your patience as we got to this point. So tonight, the department, which again has been reviewed by our city attorney, has put all of the regulations, so to speak, together. There's not a track change associated with it, but there are three key explanations associated with certain portions of the sign regulations. One is a red text that is bolded, and that kind of reflects the origin of the change. And then there are maroon text that's bolded, and that's new text added. And that's generally new text that was necessary because of the Planning and Zoning Commission's input at our last work session. And then finally, the department does have a few remaining questions, and they are shown in the blue text. So I'm just going to go through this. It shouldn't take as much time as you might think, because again, a lot of this has been discussed. So first on the list is page 2. It has to deal with gravestone. That's a new definition that's been added. Originally, it was an exclusion to the sign regulations, but we've now added it as a definition and included it as part of that. Sign, the definition of sign on page 3, that's a new description and replaces the previous. As part of that, the direction from the Planning and Zoning Commission and support of the department, articles of clothing worn by a person shall not be considered a sign. We've struck through that. We've never considered that. We've never taken that action. So for the most part, I think that was the direction we've received. Sign business, that's a new description, replaces the previous. Based upon our conversations prior to tonight, a balloon or banner was struck from that definition, again, because we do not allow balloons or banners, permanent banners. We do address temporary banners further in the sign regulations. So that's the first 3 pages. Yes, sir.
Question, this might be for Attorney Young, but the sign business, if you read through that, I'm telling you, you're having to look and read the sign to know if it's that.
The one exemption to the general rule can't put the
Content.
sign is the Supreme Court has left open prospect of still distinguishing between commercial signs or a business sign and other types of signage. So that is why that is the one situation where that rule kind of gets washed away a little bit.
Thank you.
Other questions on the first 3 pages? Page 4, freestanding sign is a new description which replaces the previous. And again, in this particular case, mast or pole was struck because since the inception of the city, we've not allowed pylon, pole, or any type of mast sign. They all have to be ground-mounted, monument types, or flat signs attached to a building. Government signs, that's a new description. Again, it used to be an exclusion. We're now including it as a definition. Portable sign, a new description, replaces a previous one. Again, all premised on our need to have content-neutral signage and consistent with the Supreme Court's action. Projection sign, again, a new description, but replaces a previous, and the same is true for temporary sign. Now, in this particular case on temporary signs, based upon our discussions at previous meetings at the work session, cardboard, wallboard, and plywood, that's been struck through again because we do not consider that acceptable even for temporary signs that never have.
Yes, Mr. Nich, if I may, in terms of, you mentioned gravestones, and we just mentioned government signs, they are still excluded from the regulation. We just now defined the terms in more specificity, that's all. So they're still excluded from the regulation. Sorry.
No, anytime, anybody, please, this is a work session. The intent is to engage in conversation.
So the portable sign, that's like, is that like those signs you see on trailers or trucks?
And those, you don't see them as often as you did, but they were like on a little trailer with 2 wheels.
Mhm.
They could hook onto the back of a car or truck. They would roll them in. They'd usually have an arrow that flashed, and then there'd be changeable copy associated with it.
Well, and I remember them going up and down like those trucks that seemed to be nothing but moving billboards going up and down Manchester several years ago.
Yeah, that was a fad for a while. I haven't seen much of them lately.
I've seen several of them lately in the beds of pickup trucks now, and they're usually the LED changeable signs.
Well, I haven't, so hopefully I won't. But we've got a definition. Yes, sir.
Under temporary signs, what about like a house for sale that might be out of plywood or something like that?
There's a description later in the sign regulations for real estate signs.
I thank you.
Under vehicle sign, that's a new definition that's been added. Page 5, there were no changes. And on page 6, we start the general description of sign regulations. And items 1 through 8 are all new descriptions of the findings, purpose, and intent, along with interpretation. I think this was a key area based upon the Supreme Court's action, its opinion, and then the other opinions that were filed by different groups of the Supreme Court justices. And this is, for all intents and purposes, I think, where we state our case that we are in compliance. And our intent is to address signs so that they complement the community, not necessarily distract from them. I think Mr. Young did an excellent job on these forums. So that's through page 7. That's the next 4 pages. Any questions on those that haven't been answered today? On page 8, prohibited signs. This is a new description. And I think, and Mr. Young can correct me, oftentimes regulations identify things you can do, and no one should assume that if it's not identified, it means you can as well. Meaning, We may say you can do a projection sign, there may be another type of sign. The intent is, again, just to say that in this instance, if a sign isn't identified by this code, it's prohibited. So we make it clear now. Because oftentimes, we used to get calls, well, I didn't see it in your code, does that mean I can do this sign? And that's not the case. And now we've given a clear description, and that's all at the bottom of page 8. Page 9, there really weren't any changes other than we have the new flat sign versus attached sign. And that's the case for 10 and 11, 12, 13, 14. So the next 7 pages are fairly reflective of what we had, which tells me, hopefully, and you, 2 things. One, the sign regulations were pretty good we had, at least in that regard. And then number 2, we're sticking with the format that we've grown accustomed to, that I think has worked pretty well. We're not radically changing things. And I think that's a positive thing from a structure standpoint. The new regulations will fit into our zoning ordinance and have the same look, feel, and hopefully impact. So through 14. If there's no other questions, on page 15, we then get into sign regulations for all C and M districts. And the question I had is relative to item A. Basically says signs in the C and M districts shall only be allowed in each district as follows, premised on architectural review, board review, and action upon them prior to issuance of building permit. Now, the question I had is, I wasn't sure if that was meant just when the sign is being submitted to the Board of Adjustment for consideration, or all signs, or somewhere in between. I can tell you that if it's all signs, we're probably going to get a lot of pushback from users, the sign companies that erect them, because it does add a substantial amount of time to the process. And from the perspective of the department, certain signs need to go to the Architectural Review Board. They're identified here. Advertising types, I believe, projection signs, sandwich board signs, and certainly I concur, board signs that are going to the Board of Adjustment for potential variances to their height, to their size, to their lighting, color, and location. But I think our regulations are precise enough that if they follow the regulations, as they have in most instances here at Town Center, we'll get a good-looking sign that's compatible with the building and the streetscape associated with the building, just my opinion. Certainly, if the commission feels strongly that all signs should go to the Architectural Review Board, that's something we can do. I can just tell you it's not going to be well received in the community.
I was thinking more just town center initially.
Well, all C districts except Clayton and Strecker Road and the Amico Station at Route 109 and Wild Horse Creek Road are in town center.
So if we,
And that's where 99.9% of our commercial signs
which is where it
applications
would
come
be, then maybe you do Board of Adjustment, which is the variance process. If somebody's trying to get around the ordinance anyway.
And again, if that were the case, it would be any sign going to the Board of Adjustment. And we generally have several go every year. Minor and major projection signs, advertising signs, and then sandwich board signs. Those 4.
So if a sign goes to the Board of Adjustment, can that overrule the Architectural Review Board?
You betcha.
Yeah, so that's the last stop.
Yep.
Okay.
So it should go to ARB if they recommend against it on a Board of Adjustment. Say the city's recommending against it, and then the Board of Adjustment approves it, it's still approved at that point. So it's our variance process.
Right.
That's my understanding. If Mr. Young knows to the contrary, I probably should let him answer that.
Oh, I shouldn't have questioned that.
No, one of the duties of the Board of Adjustment is to hear appeals of the administrative decisions, and if an administrative decision from the department or the ARB is made, and the Board of Adjustment disagrees, and applies it differently, that's within their purview.
So I think rather than having just the Board of Adjustment review it, I think the ARB should look at it at that point. And again, that's a non-conforming sign.
Right.
Do we need to,
Yeah, because we're only talking non-conforming and not every sign, right?
at this point, yeah?
Yeah. Okay.
And again, I would encourage you before the final draft letter of recommendation is presented to the Planning and Zoning Commission, look around town center and see what you think. That's the application, for the most part, of these regulations. And we do individual pin letters. There's a certain height. For the most part, there's a certain size, unless on an arterial roadway, which we get a little larger sign. But I think all in all, the sign regulations, the major sign regulations, the major change to the sign regulations that occurred in 2006 were pretty successful. Yes, sir.
As an example, on flag signs, that may be for a country, but it also says it can be for a private entity. Is there a limit to how many can be on a property? And then I would say on Clayton Avenue or Clayton Road at Lafayette High School, they must have 20 flags now. Is that allowed?
I think under the new regulations, you can have 2 signs, up to 2 flag poles, so to speak, with flags. Currently, I think we've usually interpreted it as 3. We usually assume the flag of the United States, the state flag, and then some type of commercial flag.
Because I don't drive by there often. Last time I did, those
Yeah.
were new from the prior time.
And in terms of Lafayette High School, they have a lot of the Lancer flags
That's what they are.
decorating around the stadium, and et cetera. I guess you could argue that that isn't authorized by our regulations, but I also know it adds a bit of character to the high school atmosphere. So I'm going to relocate here.
You have to fight 6 feet of empty space.
Well, I've been around Mr. Newberry all day, so we got it. We got it. That's his mistake, not being the director of the planner. He stuck with me. So, under the proposed regulations, at least in terms of flagpoles, you can have up to 2.
And just, it is worth noting that the reason we did not specify that it had to be a country or some government signage, a government flag, is the 8th Circuit recently struck down a city's regulation because it made that distinction.
Again, we're learning as we go.
I know you said you have a few signs every year that end up going to the ARB, but what percentage of the actual applications for signs, either new or replacement, end up going to the ARB?
Well, at this stage, given that we haven't had a new commercial building built since basically 2008, that was the theater, and we've had tenant changeover.
Our tenant changeovers are replacing signs and put up newer ones, so
Exactly.
what percentage
I
end
would
up going?
say it's under 5%.
Okay, so we're not sending a lot.
No, not
Okay.
at all, not at all.
So how do you want to reword this?
Well, if you'll give Mr. Newberry and Mr. Young and I the permission, I could just put the keyword variance down. We'll figure something out, and at the next meeting, we can identify that wording. And you'll have it advanced to review, and if it's acceptable, great. If not, we'll work on it.
So why don't you just start with signs requiring signs requested under Board of Adjustment. Shall.
Before they go to the Board of Adjustment, they would be sent to the Architectural Review Board.
Yeah, premised on Architectural Review Board and action upon them. So I would just start with, I would just make that whole section a Board of Adjustment section.
All right.
Because everything else would be compliant anyway, right?
Any other questions on 7 through 15? Beginning on page 16, there's just been some wording alterations on number 6, and specifically vehicle signs must be covered if the vehicle is parked on public right-of-way, so that the sign is not visible from the public right-of-way. Planning and Parks Committee of City Council is working on a redefinition of commercial vehicles, and this, I believe, is going to be more consistent with what they end up with. They're going to, it appears, allow or recommend to allow commercial vehicles to be parked on private property in the driveway, but not in the public right-of-way. And then I just switched around some of the wording to say the regulation shall not be applicable to any type of vehicle, types of vehicles that are parked in public right-of-ways, complete repairs, installations, or other services to a building or structure for no more than 8 hours during a 24-hour period, which is the typical workday. Business signs attached to wall. The height of the signs, we talked about this at our last work session, including logos or other representations, shall not exceed 24 inches. That's consistent with what we've been doing since 2006. And then we added in again the pin lettering, which I think has been very successful. Now, the pin lettering can be placed on a raceway, so the extent of installation holes or drill holes in the facade is reduced just to several in association with the raceway, not each of the letters. And that's the best approach I've found. And you see individual pin letters that have been installed without the benefit of the raceway, and when they're removed, the sign facades just looks like, you know, woodpeckers moved in and didn't leave for a long time. Then we move to 18, no changes. 19, projection signs, no changes. 20 is just, the projection signs was just some new wording that I thought was easier for at least the department to understand, but it basically says certain projection signs as determined by ARB due to their shapes or designs in relation to the architectural elements of the building to which they are attached shall be allowed additional 30%. This is just, if there's merit, if there's character, if there's quality, the review board can increase the size of a minor projection sign by 30%. 21, no changes. 22, 23, no changes. When we get to 24, under flat or monument signs, non-business. These used to be called, probably, for lack of a better term, directional or information. This one has to deal with, it said originally, each lot may have no more than 2 flat or monument signs per point of access from a public or private roadway. It really didn't go into like larger parking areas, such as, let's say, Deerbirds Town Center or Schnucks Crossing. So what I added was flat or monument signs interior to a parking area or interior portion of a lot shall be approved per a sign plan, shall be per an approved sign plan reviewed and acted upon by the Planning and Zoning Commission. The idea being is that, okay, we'll have, like in the case of Schnucks Wildwood Crossing, there's 3 access points. Each of those could have 2 types of directional signs. But interior, if they add any additional signs, that would come to you as part of the sign plan, and you would review and act upon it.
Under development plan, yeah.
Yep. Moving to 25.
Question.
This is the light, I'm sorry.
So, just hypothetically, where Wildwood Pub and Grill is, I think they have signs out there advertising they're prepared to build more on that.
Mhm.
Is that under an already approved plan, or would that come before us?
That's a temporary sign, if it's,
No, I mean for the buildings that would be built.
yes. So if they, we used to call them future use of site. They were under the temporary signs definition.
No, I'm talking, so, not the signs that might be there right now. I'm saying when they build the buildings, is that plan all for the future buildings already approved, or no? So they would need to come to us still?
Yep.
Okay,
Sure.
gotcha.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I misunderstood. We've added to the LEDs as a lighting source. And I haven't approved a sign in years that hasn't had one. No one uses the other anymore. Service station style canopies on 27, item L. The original wording allowed 2 flat signs on 2 sides of the canopy, which totaled 4. We currently allow only 1 per 2 sides of the canopy for 2, and I think that's the best approach. There's already enough with the canopy telling you what it is. Along with freestanding monument signs, wall signs, gas pumps, et cetera, et cetera. On the next page, there are no changes. And then on 29, this is something we've seen on occasion. Our current sign regulations for subdivision signs allows 2 signs at the entry, each being no greater than 25 square feet in size. So as you come in, you can have 1 on each side. Oftentimes what we find, like in the case of like Garden Valley Farms, they did a center median island and they wanted to do 1 sign in the middle. And so what this does is that if a single monument sign is preferred, it can be up no greater than 50 square feet, and it will adhere to the height and width requirements associated herein. So it gives them the option of 2 at 25 or 1 at 50.
Is that what Village of Brightleaf has done with their signage or their element there? Yep.
Well, there's the sign that they have on the curved stone wall. The structure itself has their logo, and they went to the Board of Adjustment for that. So this was just kind of what we've experienced over the last 20-plus years. Temporary signs, 30 and 31, there were no changes. 32, there were not. And then on 33, this is our, yes, ma'am.
Sorry to interrupt you, on 31, you had under D, you had construction in blue, which you noted was a question.
Oh, I apologize for that. Well, I added that. It said just temporary signs originally. And it didn't seem explanatory enough. So I added it, and that's a question more for John Young. If that creates a problem, certainly it can be removed. But that's what it basically is describing. It says, like at the end, for the purposes of this subsection, completion of construction shall be evidenced by the lack of any opening or pending building permits. So it is, for all intents and purposes, associated with construction.
Did you define it at the beginning?
No, it's not in the definition. So that's when I'll let Mr. Young chew on. Thanks for catching me.
I don't have objection to it from a title standpoint.
Okay. Gets the point across.
And then temporary banners are friends. They work us on and off, it seems, for the last 5 to 6 years. Currently, we limit temporary banners to just 1 per lot. This was the same as the number of business signs. In some instances, like Starbucks, they can have 3 wall signs or attached, flat attached signs, which means they could have 3 temporary signs. So I took it back to 1. Then I changed the size of the banner to 32 square feet. That seems to be a standard dimension, 4 by 8, 4 feet by 8 feet. And then I added, this was part of it originally, number 5. A person exercising the right to place temporary signs on property as described in this subsection must limit the number of signs on the property to 4. And I said, I changed it to 1, but before I changed this to 1, I wanted to make sure 1 was okay, not 4.
So can you give an example of number 5? Person exists, give me an example of who put 4 signs or 1 sign.
Well, again, if you have like in the case of Starbucks, they have 3. They have
Wall signs.
2 frontages, plus they have a plaza area, which gives them the 3rd extra sign. They could do 3 temporary signs when they apply. It seems like a lot.
So under number 5, you want it to say 1.
That's my preference, yes, ma'am.
On 34F, did you not finish your sentence?
No,
No, it's a
continuation.
Just goes to
Let's
G.
do F and G. Right?
I think it's complete, but I'll check.
It doesn't say
Oh, I
that
see, they all
previously.
ended that way, never mind.
Yeah.
So I guess my pitch is temporary banners. Some people love them, some people hate them. There's people in between. I think we've grown up to the point where we've agreed that due to grand openings, special sales, closings, things like that, we need to allow a temporary banner. But I'd be hard pressed to argue for more than 1.
The only place that I could see, I mean, none of the businesses, I can't imagine would necessarily need more than 1. The place that I would see where this would become an issue would be at Lafayette High School.
That's a good point. You know, we encourage them to use their sign that they can do changeable copy with the letters.
Then we killed it.
Can't we give them like a special dispensation or something like the Pope does? The high school.
As I mentioned, they've got a lot of flags already.
Yeah, but they also have multiple entries too, so we can see.
Could you write in something where, you know, a site is as big as Lafayette High School is and has as many entrances and exits as they do, where they, you know, something like that might be able to do it rather than, you know, business frontage where.
You could do entry,
Why not be specific about
side entry.
education, you know, schools? That's
Or
what we're
even
talking
specific
about.
to high schools.
Yeah.
I mean, that would be.
We have middle schools too, so.
But
But
that's,
oh, but the issue is just at a high school.
I think the high school, I think you have to be able to do something. That's just me.
I don't know, Joe, I think
That's,
you gotta.
I think Mr. Young probably has a response to special legislation, so to speak.
I'm hesitant to suggest giving more speech to a particular speaker than others, but the concept that Mr. Donnie references about size of property, number of entrances, things of that nature.
You do that.
That I'm comfortable with.
And we've done that. Remember, in the non-urban resident district, large institutional uses that have 2 frontages or more on major arterials or over 30 acres and are occupied, the building is occupied for a period of time, they can get just 1 monument sign, but 2. So we've done that previously based upon characteristics. Why don't you let Mr. Newberry, Mr. Young, and I take a look at that, we'll see what we bring back.
Do it on size and access point. And then,
Just for comparison, do you happen to know the lot size of Lafayette versus, say, the lot size of Deerberg's or Schnucks?
Deerberg's was like 18 acres.
18.
Lafayette, I believe, is closer to 30 some odd acres. That's my recollection. Like Wildwood Middle School is 30 plus acres and about the same size, generally speaking. Maybe a little
Wow,
smaller.
Wildwood Middle has as much space as Lafayette.
Oh, I think Lafayette actually may be a little bigger,
I guess they go back a ways.
all the way to Route 100,
Oh, okay, gotcha.
the whole way.
and again, this is temporary signs, so it's when they have their band competition, you've got bus parking and entry and
Yeah.
exit, practice area, and, you know, they're gonna take up all those signs.
Well, there's, they have a lot of special events too. And they're always requesting temporary banners for those. We do the best we can. But like I said, let us take another look at it.
Okay.
Thank you.
And then the last one is page 35, that's signage signage on public property. This is a new description, but replaces one that was there since the inception of the city. So based upon the discussion we had, there's a couple of areas we need to look at. Obviously, the one we just discussed, temporary signs, and then the variance procedure with the architectural review board. And then we'll do one more quick review for just grammar, things like that.
Page 35. I guess I'm wanting to know how this fits in with campaigning and people walking sidewalks with holding a sign.
Yeah, this particular language is very specific in terms of what is prohibited and it was drawn from a Supreme Court precedent that was upheld out of Los Angeles County. And the specific language that addresses the issue you're discussing, it says, as opposed to no signs in public right of way, it says no sign and kind of gives them the details, shall be affixed to any public right of way. And specifically it says, shall post, paste, print, nail, stamp, tack, or otherwise fasten any sign calculated to attract attention, public, or cause the same to be done on a curbstone, on curb lamp, or public, facility, in essence, except as may be required by state law. So it has to be physically affixed to the public facility, not just a sign someone's carrying, strapped around their neck, on their t-shirt, anything like that. Goes back to the point that Mr. Goodrich made about removing the t-shirt shall not be included. Part of that is, because we've got enough definitions that say signs have to be some form of structure.
Okay,
So you could carry one on a ball and march back and forth.
Yes, you could.
Okay.
okay, because I was reading, I guess I missed over where it says construct or maintain any sign, and I was looking at any sign over a sidewalk, street, or alley, and I was thinking of someone walking down the street holding a sign, would that be illegal?
No, because it
Okay.
says affix, paste,
Okay.
post, to, right.
Okay,
Construct or maintain, when we say maintain, I don't mean to keep. I mean, you are responsible for the maintenance. of.
okay. Okay, then I'm good with that.
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, that completes Mr. Newberry, Mr. Young, and I's presentation on work session. We have a couple of minutes before the regular session. Are there any other questions or comments?
Job well done.
You know those signs
Sure.
that people, like the spinning signs to, the going out of business and.
Prohibited.
Anything else? Otherwise, let's adjourn and move on to the next meeting.
Thank you all again for coming early. Your input.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
First and second, all those in favor, say
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you again.
Travis, you looked worried.
I wasn't that worried.
He would have just chased us down to the next room.
Move to the next room.
Oh.